Close your eyes for a second and imagine the best day of your life. Not the most productive day. Not the day you hit a goal or closed a deal or finished a project. The best day. The kind where time moves strangely slow, where you're completely present, where you go to bed that night feeling full, not tired. Full, for most people, that day looks something like this. You woke up without an alarm. You ate when you were hungry. You spent hours with people you actually love. You made something with your hands, or moved your body, or sat somewhere beautiful and did absolutely nothing for a while. And at no point did anyone tell you where to be. Here's the thing that should bother you. That day, the best day you can imagine, is basically just a Tuesday for the humans who came before us. Not a vacation. Not a reward for a decade of hard work. Just a regular, unremarkable day in the life of the species you belong to. Because for 95% of human history, there were no jobs, no employers, no schedules, no money, no performance reviews, no alarm clocks. And yet the species didn't collapse. Civilization didn't burn. People didn't descend into chaos. So the obvious question is, what exactly did they do all day? The answer is stranger, richer, and more uncomfortable than most people expect. Let's start with something concrete, because this is the kind of claim that sounds too good to be true. In 1966, anthropologist Marshall Solins sat down and compiled data from studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies groups whose way of life most closely resembles the humans who lived before agriculture existed. He published his findings in an essay that became one of the most cited pieces in all of anthropology. He called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society. His argument was simple and devastating. These groups, scattered across Africa, Australia, and South America, were not struggling to survive. They were not spending every waking hour in desperate pursuit of food. On average, adults devoted somewhere between 15 and 20 hours per week to what we would call work acquiring food, making tools, maintaining shelter. That's roughly 2 to 3 days. The rest of the week? Unscheduled, you probably work 40 hours a week. Maybe more. You wake before you're ready, commute, sit inside a building for the majority of your daylight hours, come home depleted, sleep, and repeat. 5 days out of every 7. For roughly 45 years. Now consider that the people who came before you, not some other species, not some evolutionary predecessor, but Homo sapiens, with the same brain and body you have right now, did 2.5 days of work a week. And by most measures of physical health, they were doing better than their agricultural successors. Archaeologists have compared skeletal remains of hunter-gatherers and early farmers side by side. The farmers were shorter. Their bones showed signs of severe nutritional deficiency. Their spines showed damage from years of repetitive labor bent over fields, grinding grain by hand. Their teeth were riddled with cavities from carbohydrate-heavy diets. They died younger on average. The hunter-gatherers? Taller, stronger bone density. Better teeth, less joint damage. The evidence written into 10,000-year-old bones is unambiguous. The shift to agriculture was, by most biological measures, a step down in quality of life. So the question isn't why ancient humans had so much free time. The question is why we gave it up. But before we get to that, let's spend a day in their world. Dawn breaks. You don't set an alarm because there are no alarms. You wake when light reaches you gradually, naturally, the way your biology was designed. The fire from the night before still has embers in it. Someone stirs it back to life. The camp slowly wakes not to a blaring sound, but to the smell of smoke, the sound of movement, the low murmur of voices. Breakfast isn't a separate event you rush through. It's woven into the morning. Leftover meat from 2 days ago, dried and still good. Some tubers someone dug up yesterday. Berries collected along the walk back to camp. You eat sitting down. You talk. This might sound simple. But here is what you have to understand about that conversation. It is not a distraction from the real work of the day. It is the real work of the day. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar spent years studying social bonding in primate groups and eventually in human societies. His research suggests that the primary technology of early human survival wasn't spears or fire, it was relationships. In a world with no police, no laws, no written contracts, no banks, your only security was the people around you. If they trusted you, they fed you when you were sick. If they liked you, they shared when you had nothing. If they respected you, they helped you raise your children. The raw on being genuinely likable in a hunter-gatherer band was, quite literally, survival, so those morning conversations weren't idle chatter. They were maintenance. They were the social infrastructure that kept the group intact. Around mid-morning, a small group might head out to hunt or gather. But the key word there is might. If the group ate well 2 days ago, and food is still available in camp, today might not be a hunting day at all. The decision is based on need, not on a schedule. Nobody hunts every day. Nobody gathers every day. You do it when it makes sense to. When a hunt does happen, it doesn't look like what movies have taught you to expect. Humans are persistence hunters. We are, in evolutionary terms, built for one thing above almost all other animals: sustained movement over long distances while sweating to regulate our temperature. Most large mammals cannot sweat effectively. When they sprint, they overheat. When they overheat, they slow down. And then the humans who have been jogging at a steady pace for 2 or 3 hours across savanna grass simply catch up. This is not dramatic. There is no sudden ambush, no terrifying face-off. The animal is exhausted, overheated, disoriented. The humans approach. It ends quietly. The tracking, the reading of prints in the dirt, the following of the sun and wind, these are skills that take years to develop and involve an intimate knowledge of landscape, animal behavior, and weather that most modern people couldn't begin to replicate. The hunt, from start to finish, might take 4 to 6 hours, including travel. The hunters return to camp. Everyone gathers. The animal is butchered with practiced efficiency. There is eating. There is probably something that functions a lot like celebration, not because today was exceptional, but because eating together always was. And then by early afternoon, the productive part of the day is essentially finished. This is where things get interesting. And strange. And a little unsettling if you sit with it long enough. After the food is handled, the rest of the day unfolds with no particular agenda. People rest in the shade. Parents play with children, not structured play with educational objectives. Just play. Adults groom each other. They talk. They nap. Anthropologist James Woodburn, who spent years documenting the Hadza people of Tanzania, noted that adults spent enormous amounts of daily time in what could only be described as leisure, not recuperating from exhaustion, but genuinely resting by choice. Sitting, watching, existing without justification. This is the part modern people find hardest to process. We have been so thoroughly conditioned to equate rest with laziness and productivity with virtue that the image of a healthy adult sitting under a tree doing nothing for 2 hours in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon feels almost morally wrong. We want to assign it a purpose. They must have been thinking strategically. They must have been recovering. They must have been doing something. But they weren't. They were just being. And the extraordinary thing is that this wasn't a failure of ambition. It was the natural state of a species that had, for the moment, met all its needs. During the quieter hours of the day, something else happened. Making things. Not for trade. Not for profit. For skill, for beauty, for the pleasure of competence. In 1994, explorers discovered Chauvet Cave in southern France. Inside were paintings estimated to be 36,000 years old. Horses rendered in profile with accurate perspective. Lions in motion, their legs blurred the way ancient artists understood movement. Rhinoceroses overlapping each other in a way that suggests depth and composition. Many people across many generations went deep into a dark cave by firelight and made art. Sophisticated, intentional, breathtaking art. Not for survival, not for food, for something that we might call meaning. In Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found shell beads over 100,000 years old. Tiny holes drilled through small shells, clearly designed to be strung together and worn. The nearest coastline was 20 kilometers away. Someone walked 40 kilometers round trip for shells, then spent hours carefully perforating them with stone tools for no reason other than to look good. In 2008, a 40,000-year-old flute carved from a vulture's wing bone was found in Germany. 5 precisely spaced finger holes. Someone understood pitch, someone understood music, and someone spent significant, focused time creating an instrument for no purpose other than to play it. When you encounter these objects in a museum, they're labeled with dry academic descriptions. But what they actually are is evidence of people who had enough time to develop complex aesthetic preferences, enough leisure to pursue them, and enough skill from sustained practice to produce results that survive 100,000 years and still move us. You make art if you can find the time. They made art because they had it. As the sun drops, something remarkable shifts. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent years recording conversations among the Juhoansi people of southern Africa. She analyzed hundreds of hours of dialogue, comparing what people talked about during the day versus what they talked about after dark, around the fire. During the day, conversations were functional. Who saw animal tracks where? Which gathering sites were producing? Complaints about fairness in food sharing, practical logistics, the management of a small interdependent community. But at night, around the fire, 81% of conversations shifted to something else entirely. Stories, not gossip, not planning. Stories, myths about how the world came to be, tales of ancestors who did impossible things, accounts of journeys to places most people in the group had never seen. Humor that made the whole camp laugh. Speculation about the spirit world. Questions about death and what came after. The kind of conversation that requires a full stomach and a sense of safety to even be possible. Wiesner argued that this is where human culture was actually born. Gods, moral codes, shared history, collective identity, none of it arises when you're hungry or afraid. It arises in the warm hours after a good meal, when the fire makes the darkness small and the people you love are close enough to touch. And even sleep was different. Before artificial light reshaped human biology, people didn't sleep the way you do one long, uninterrupted block that you feel guilty for needing more of. They slept in 2 phases. First sleep, roughly 4 hours after dark. Then, a quiet waking period of an hour or 2, in complete darkness, when people would lie still, think, pray, or have slow, quiet conversations with whoever else was awake. Then, second sleep, another 4 hours until dawn. Historians found this pattern described across medieval European texts before gas lamps arrived. Sleep researchers in the 1990s found that when people are removed from artificial light, they return to it naturally within weeks. Your 2 a.m. insomnia might not be a disorder. It might be a memory. About 10,000 years ago, in a crescent-shaped arc of land stretching through what is now Iraq, Syria, and Turkey, something changed. Small groups of humans began deliberately planting seeds, tending them, returning to the same place season after season, keeping animals penned rather than following herds. It was, in the beginning, a supplement, a way of having food more reliably, and insurance against bad hunting seasons. But agriculture carries a built-in logic that's almost impossible to escape once you enter it. More food allows more children to survive. More children means more mouths. More mouths means more food is needed. More food needed means more land, more labor, more farming. Within a few generations, populations had grown to sizes that could no longer be sustained by hunting and gathering. The option to go back was gone. There were simply too many people. And farming demanded something hunter-gatherers had never experienced: sustained, repetitive, physically brutal labor. Plowing breaks your spine. Planting and weeding and harvesting are hour after exhausting hour of bent-over work with no variation. Defending crops from animals and neighboring groups becomes a constant, grinding obligation. The food itself becomes worse grain-heavy, mineral-poor, monotonous. The skeletal evidence across early agricultural societies is grim. Shorter people, deformed joints, systemic nutritional deficiency, infant mortality that rises, not falls, as farming intensifies. By every biological metric, early farmers lived harder lives than the hunter-gatherers who came before them. But they produced more people. And in the mathematics of history, numbers tend to win. From farming came surplus. From surplus came storage. From storage came ownership. From ownership came inequality. Those who controlled the surplus controlled everything. Priests emerged to explain it. Soldiers emerged to protect it. Administrators emerged to manage it. Scribes to record it. Merchants to trade it. And eventually, over thousands of years, a world appeared in which the overwhelming majority of humans spent most of their waking hours performing labor for the benefit of someone else in exchange for enough resources to survive. We called it civilization. And in many ways, it genuinely was art, science, philosophy, medicine, architecture. All of it became possible at scales that hunter-gatherers could never achieve. But something else was also true, something we rarely say out loud. The average person's daily experience got worse. Here's where we land. You will spend approximately 90,000 hours of your life at work, 1/3 of your entire waking existence, handed over to an employer in exchange for the resources to survive in the system your ancestors accidentally built. You commute in the dark. You eat lunch at your desk. You defer the things you actually want to do, the art, the long conversations, the unhurried mornings to a retirement that, if you reach it, you will spend a significant portion of in deteriorating health. And the goal, the dream sold to every generation, is to eventually earn enough freedom to live something like the life your ancestors had by default. They woke without alarms. They ate real food and knew exactly where it came from. They spent the majority of their day in genuine, face-to-face community with people who depended on them and whom they depended on. They made things with their hands not for a market, but because making things is what humans do when they're free. They told each other stories in the dark until sleep came naturally. They slept in 2 easy phases and used the quiet middle hours for reflection instead of anxiety. They were not primitive. They were not suffering. They were not waiting for agriculture and industry to come and save them from their miserable existence. They were, by most measures available to us, doing fine. The things you chased: time, autonomy, creativity, genuine connection, rest without guilt, were not the distant rewards of a lifetime of labor to your ancestors. They were the texture of an ordinary day. We did not discover a better way to be human. We discovered a way to be more people, a way to build cities and empires and technologies that genuinely extend what's possible for the species. But we should probably be honest with ourselves about what the individual human being lost in that transaction. Not everything. Not most things. But some things that mattered. The freedom to wake up on a Tuesday with no plan. The long afternoon with nothing to justify it. The fire at night and the story that made everyone laugh, and the slow drift into the first of 2 good sleeps. You are the same species. The same brain. The same body. The same need for connection and meaning and rest and beauty. You're just living a life that wasn't designed around those needs. And that's worth thinking about maybe on a slow morning, with no alarm, when you have nowhere you need to be.